Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see so many people here. I think for the first time, the conference, all available seats were taken on our online portal before today's event. It's great at this time when there are so many challenges. You've all taken the time to be here and to join us today. In saying that, just a thanks to start off with to John Garton, the organiser of today's event. We work very closely with John. It's been an excellent event. Again, as many of the speakers have said who are guests, the hospitality has been fantastic, and the organisation, as usual, is excellent. So thank you very much, John, for your efforts. So I do indeed work for the Department for the Economy. I think Kirsten this morning referred to me as his colleague. I report to Kirsten as our minister. My team, which is myself and Catherine Fleming, who's in the back, we're responsible for the creation and delivery of the island's rural policy as it impacts on our rural businesses. And we also are effectively the rural payments agency for the island. So we deliver grant support to many of you people here today and others who can't join us in a way that supports very much the activity, the very important activity of farming, which really does matter on the island. So what am I going to talk about today? I'm just going to give you an overview of rural support. So why do we have rural support? We'll put it in some international context, some historic context, and perhaps some local context. And then I'll go on to talk about the rural support scheme for 2023. And apologies to those of you who aren't engaged on the scheme, but we'll get sort of into some quite technical detail of how that scheme will be delivered for 23, because there are going to be some changes. And this is an opportunity to share those changes with you face to face. Bear in mind, please, that the changes yet aren't fully set in stone. So there's going to be further development work on the scheme over the next month. And we're going to be ready to roll it out in January, so time is of the essence. If we're a little bit difficult to get hold of these days, it's because we've been quite busy pulling this together, and to say we've still got a little bit of work to do. So I'll be just talking about the redesign of the scheme, how it's going to be implemented, and then finally a word on the budget, which we've already heard about early on today. So I'd just like to start with the news that farming subsidies on the island are about to be terminated. And I thought that might wake a few people up. But don't worry, it's actually a question of language. The term farming subsidies has got a lot of negative connotations. It's not really useful for producers, I don't think for consumers or taxpayers or the general public's understanding of why we provide rural support. So what I'd like to do in a sort of Orwellian theme is to introduce a removal of some words from our language. I think George Orwell called it Newspeak in the novel 1984. And we're going to remove farming subsidies, and we're going to replace it with a reward for the provision of public goods. We've heard about public goods from a number of speakers, and really this underpins our revaluation of agriculture and how we want to emphasise the good work that's done by agriculturalists, and the fact that the emphasis really is on rewarding those public goods. So moving on and just putting agricultural support in a slightly broader context, I thought I'd start with the aims of the EU Common Agriculture Policy. As you know, Jersey has not been a full part of the EU. However, the Common Agriculture Policy has had a fundamental impact on our industry, not least of which because the majority of the food that our islanders consume benefits from the provisions in this policy. So it's worth taking a look at. So the first aim is to support farmers and improve agricultural productivity. And importantly, I've highlighted, so that consumers have a stable supply of affordable food. The origins of the Common Agriculture Policy were back after the last World War, when food shortages were a serious issue. It was necessary to encourage production, and it was desirable to make that food more affordable. I was looking at one of my statistic journals the other day, as I do when I've got nothing better on my mind. And in the year of my birth, 1967, on the island, the average household expenditure on food was 25.7% of income. More recently, in 2015, that's 10%. So actually, the agriculture community has done a very good job on providing cheaper food, to the point where we could almost argue that it's become too cheap, but I'll leave that for a second. Going on through the list, we've got ensuring that farmers make a reasonable living. And one of the functions of rural support is effectively a levelling up mechanism, whereby rural communities are supported, incomes are supported. We'll also then move on to tackling climate change and the sustainable management of natural resources, and maintaining rural areas and landscapes, looking after the environment. It's keeping the rural economy alive and promoting farming, agriculture, industries and associated sectors. It's keeping alive because it's an important part of our culture and heritage. We've heard about that a lot earlier as well. Every picture tells a story. It's not the first time you've seen this slide today. We've spoken about climate change. We've spoken about extremes of climate and the fact that they're going to increase. It seems to me sensible that we have the ability still to produce food on the island. If we don't, we'll see more of this. I don't think it's anything anybody wants to see. In fact, if you look at in that post-war era, the dilemma that faces governments is, do we have a shortage of food or do we have a surplus? Clearly, we want to have a surplus. Governments create interventions to create a surplus. In a free market economy, the surplus of a commodity will drive down prices. Prices get driven down, farmers struggle, they then have to become more productive, the cycle goes on. We've sort of reached a crisis point where something will have to change, or this will happen more frequently, or certainly as far as the island is concerned, and looking more in a more insular way, farming will not exist. We've lost 50% of our farming businesses in the last 10 years. 10 years forward, as Andrew showed the graph earlier, that could mean there would be no farmers in Jersey. Personally, I think that would be a disaster for the island. So government has a role to play to ensure that that does not happen. We all have a role to play to ensure that doesn't happen. So looking at agricultural support across developed societies, it's nothing unique to Jersey or the EU. This is a screenshot of OECD data, which is available online. Anyone can look it up. And what this graph is showing is in 2021, the value of agricultural support provided by government interventions represented as a percentage of farm gate turnover. So I've actually highlighted on the graph the UK. So 23.4% of the value of farm gate produce was represented by agricultural support provided by government interventions. Jersey's equivalent in 2021 was 4%. So we're down somewhere by Ukraine and Australia. So significantly less. So when I'm focusing today on our support scheme, let's bear in mind, relative to other jurisdictions, just exactly where we sit in these equations. This next slide shows the graph of historical context of agricultural support. In today's money terms, and again, this was mentioned earlier today, in 1993, we reached a peak of about £18 million. Back at that time, that represented just under 5% of the total of government expenditure. If today we had retained an agricultural budget of 5% of government expenditure, the support budget would be £50 million. By 2018, it was just over £1 million. I'm pleased to say we've turned the corner. It's been difficult, but we have, and we're taking it back in the other direction. The table on the right-hand side shows agricultural support represented as a per capita contribution in 2021. Jersey, £24. New Zealand, £21, quite similar. Some of the other research work I've shown has demonstrated in New Zealand in that year, average household expenditure on food was 15%, half as much again as ours. So on the island, effectively, we benefit from the Common Agricultural Policy funding, and every citizen in the EU is paying £159 per year to support agriculture. In the UK, it's 96. We benefit from that, but we're not doing the same thing ourselves. I think there's a really serious moral question in terms of how we operate as a society if we expect other people to provide our cheaper food and we're not making equivalent contributions. The Isle of Man is quite an interesting case in point also, £128 per person per year. They have a £10.7 million budget, population of 86,000 people. They've got more farmland than we have. They've got about 300 farms still active. They've lost 4% of their farms in the last 10 years. We've lost 50%. So another worthwhile comparison. So let's just now go on to talk about next year's rural support scheme. We're going to make a transition to a rural credit system to reward farming practices. It's going to follow a similar format to what you're familiar with and what we've delivered over the last, I think, 6 years during the duration of the last rural economy strategy. And it's based in 3 tiers. So the first tier is support for quality standard accreditation schemes, as we currently deliver. The second tier is support for decoupled production. So that was formerly the single area payment and the quality milk payment. And thirdly, the Rural Initiative Scheme is Tier 3, which now will be support for integrated farm management, support for staff training and skills, support for landscape management, and support for investment projects. So some detail on the credits. What we'll be doing under Tier 1 is awarding credit points for each of the accreditation schemes which we currently recognise. This list isn't finalised yet, and one of the areas we're working with at the moment is to look at smallholders and appropriate accreditation schemes for smaller scale businesses. I think Kirsten mentioned earlier that one of the objectives of the new support scheme is going to be equitable, it's going to be accessible, it certainly needs to be effective, it's got to be driven by evidence, and we're focused on outcomes. In terms of accessibility and making it equitable, we want every rural business to be able to access the scheme, and we want the payments to the scheme to reflect the size of the business, but in a way which encourages more activity. Already this year, we've had the poultry farmers welcomed back onto the scheme for the first time. So welcome back, they've been put onto the scheme for the first time. And we had the indoor growers back onto the scheme for the first time since 2006. And we realised we have a part to play to have every rural business engaged with the support that we can deliver. Moving on to Tier 2 for next year, we have a livestock payment or a livestock credit point. So 18 points for a per dairy cow, 9 points per beef cattle, and so on. And then for the crops, we're starting to break out the crops into activities which we want to see to encourage. So for example, an export crop receives 3 credits per VG, whereas a local food crop receives 5 credits per VG. So in this way, we can start to tune up our interventions to support the type of activity which we wish to see on the island. This is going to be an ongoing process. We're having to work quite quickly at the moment to adapt our current scheme to roll it out in time for 2023. It's going to be an evolutionary rollout, so it'll look quite similar to the 2022 scheme, although we're using a credit system rather than a straight amount of money per VG. We're also moving away from, I think in the past, the previous system had been criticised to some extent because a single area payment related a certain amount of money to each individual field, and some landowners felt they were entitled to that payment rather than the farmers themselves. The credit system is rewarding the farming system delivered by the farming business or the individual, and that's where the focus is going to be. Tier 3. So this is where our new investment is going. The first part of Tier 3 is support for integrated farm management. Those of you on the leaf mark scheme will be familiar with their wheel, and you will be delivering alongside that scheme in a manner which is independently verified by LeafMark, a soil management plan, a water management plan, nutrient management, waste management, animal health, conservation and landscape plan, energy audit plan. We're going to reward you for those activities. One of the pieces of work I've been conducting recently was an analysis of the red tape that industry, not only farming industry, but all industry on the island has had to face, and the increasing amounts of bureaucracy and paperwork that are completed on an annual basis by most businesses. There are between 80 and 90 different pieces of work, of red tape, let's call it red tape, that I've identified in that process, costing thousands of pounds, taking hundreds of man hours. And actually, in a lot of these areas, very valid recommendations, very valued things that need to be done, but we've not been rewarding businesses for it. It's been an extra burden. So actually now we're going to move to a point where we're creating a reward for that activity. And that reward is delivering real gains, particularly environmental gains. We've heard about the improvement to our water quality on the island from a few speakers, and that's been driven by the implementation of these plans. So we really want to, A, encourage that activity, but B, now reward the businesses that have undertaken that activity. For too long, we've spoken about these things, spoken about the reward, spoken about the concept of public money for public goods, but actually come up short when it comes to delivering that public money for public goods. Second part of Tier 3 is on staff training and skills. So these are points awarded per member of full-time staff, either entitled, licensed on a work permit, who are here for slightly less time per year. We recognise that for every business, their future depends on the right level of staff training and skills. And we wish to recognise that again and reward it under this scheme. Third area is landscape management. So points awarded, credits awarded per vergee for the growing of cover crops. Again, we've mentioned today several times how important they are in improving soil health. So we're going to deliver a reward for that behaviour. Most farms under the lease scheme have to have conservation area recognised and highlighted on their farm holding. So we're rewarding that with a managed conservation area credit. And we also recognise that on every farm, there are significant amounts of managed hedgerows. So we're also rewarding that. For 2023, that'll be done with a simple formula. The average field size on the island is about 5 vergees. From that, we can calculate the perimeter of that piece of land and work out that the average amount of hedgerow per vergee is 75 metres. We simply multiply your farm area by 75 metres to ascertain the average area of hedgerow which a farm has. And we'll use that for a starting point. Further on, as we develop the scheme over the coming years, what we'd really like to do is identify on a field-by-field basis exactly what the length of hedgerow is and exactly what's on the hedgerow, so that one hedgerow may be a wall, one may be a row of oak trees, and they've got different values. All of this has to be data-driven. It has to be evidence-based. So it's going to be about working in partnership with the industry, with the sectors over the coming years to build better data, to build better evidence. As the budget increases, which we sincerely hope it will, it becomes easier for us then to justify that extra budget by making sure that the support payments and the reward are based on that right evidence. So here's a worked example of an arable farm, 505 vergees. This is how the system will work. The credits are awarded for the accreditation. We've got export crop of 500 vergees times the 3 credits per vergee. That's 1,500 credits. Then on to Tier 3, the credit rewards for the management plans. Then moving up to the next column, credit rewards for the staff. So on this particular holding, there'd be 12 staff as an example. Then credit rewards for the cover crop on the whole of the 500 verges, conservation area at a notional 5 verges, the hedgerow calculation, giving a total value of 4,127 credits for the year for that business. Of course, points means prizes, or in this instance, that will be transferred then at a payment rate per credit. That payment rate per credit will be determined by the available budget. We're currently going through an exercise of evaluating all of the returns from 2022, which will be used to base your 2023 payments to make sure that we've got the right number, the right value per credit when we come to make the payments. So a little bit about the process. Application packs will be sent to all the recipients of support in 2022 in December this year. It'll follow a similar format to the application packs you were filling out last year. And we actually already have the data for 2022, so we'll be able to pre-populate those forms for you. So that'll be an agricultural return, as you currently have. It'll be a grant assurance statement, as you currently have. It'll be your land use declaration form. We'll use the data that we already hold for you from this year. If there are any amendments to make the amendments, please. And then send that back along with your evidence of your certification of the various schemes. We'll then process the payment on receipt of all completed documentation. The scheme will open in January 2023. We're very aware of the imminent financial pressures. We're aware of the changing circumstances regarding credit on fertiliser purchases. So we're anxious to open the scheme in time that will really assist cash flow for businesses, particularly those seasonal businesses that are going to be under significant pressure in the early part of next year. As soon as we receive the documentation, we will make the payment, but you do have until the end of September until the scheme closes, by which date we will need all applications to be received. For the last element of the Tier 3 of the scheme is the Rural Initiative Scheme, and that's for project funding. That's going to run next year in a similar format to 2022. It's project funding for investment in productivity improvements, environmental enhancement, and social sustainability. The funding offer will be for 1 year, with a grant cap based on the amount of rural credits that your business has accrued, and up to 80% of the value of a project. You can have more than one project. I think in years gone by, we had a slightly different process for the Rural Initiative Scheme, whereby we received bids from businesses. It then went before a panel, and we were able to make some awards as a result of those applications, whereas many applicants were denied because either there wasn't enough funding or preference was given to other projects. That in some ways wasn't equitable, because we ended up not helping all businesses on an even basis. The delivery of the new scheme will enable us to help all businesses on an even basis. In terms of budgetary amounts, so you can have a sort of pre-warning, the current budget will be the same as 2022. So for those of you who've taken advantage of the scheme in 2022, it's going to be a similar amount of money. So the process, you submit a project proposal to us, as indeed you did this year. We then vet the proposal. We then send you your project grant offer form, which you complete and return. You then provide evidence of the delivery of the project, and that's invoices and perhaps a photograph or two of the items purchased. And then you receive the grant funding. As we're a small team, we're trying to simplify the administration of these schemes as much as we can, and we understand that helps you too. So in terms of amounts of money, looking at the forecasting, which I mentioned earlier, for Tier 1, we're looking at around about £250,000 of support for those quality standard accreditation schemes. A £1.4 million budget just over for the decoupled production. So that's the old SAP and QMP. And then on to tier 3, where our new investment is going. 160,000 for integrated farm management, 200,000 for staff training and skills, over $500,000 for landscape management, and 600,000 for the investment project. Total budget, 3.17 million. I think in 2018 we were 1.1. We saw this graph earlier, actually. So that shows, in historic context, and the fact that we've turned the corner. I've been working for government since 2018, and I'm not trying to actually take credit for this directly, but we have turned a corner. We've got further to go. I think you heard a commitment from our minister this morning that he wants to take us further. I hope that by working together, we all support him to achieve that, because we really do need to do it. I think we've got to be optimistic. There are a lot of challenges, but you wouldn't be farmers if you're not optimistic. It takes courage to plant something in the soil and wait for it to grow and nurture it. To suffer the anxiety that climate extreme changes bring, to market that product. And we've got 2 fantastic products on the island, as we've heard earlier. And we've got a lot of opportunity for new initiatives. We have the largest tea plantation in Europe. We've got a nascent industry in cannabis production. We've got vineyards, many other activities. We need to have food for our population. There's got to be some opportunity. Where do we want to be in 20, 30 years' time? It's certainly not with the pictures of the empty shells, which I showed you earlier. That's definitely not where we need to be. We need diversity. We need people working on the land. We need farming to be still central to our sense of place and culture and identity. I sincerely hope it will be. Future development for our credit awards. Public engagement is important. How can we support farms which open their doors to the general public, which allow educational visits? For those of you that engage in social media, promoting the benefits of the work that takes place. In our landscape and environment, how can we better reward soil health? How can we reward renewable energy use? On social aspects, how can we encourage young farmers? What are we going to do about business succession? How can we support the creation of a farming foundation to get people back onto the land in perhaps some new ownership models that we haven't thought of yet? These are opportunities. We need to work together to fulfill these opportunities. Thank you.